So this movie has been a long time in the making. I remember being a little 11-year-old boy playing Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and 3 and hearing rumors that they're gonna make a Five Nights at Freddy's movie, they're gonna make a Five Nights at Freddy's movie, which never came to fruition. But now, almost 10 years later, here we are. And what do I have to say as someone who was a fan of the series as a child and stayed pretty much up to date with the lore up until the more recent games? Um I'm satisfied. So if you haven't seen it already, I'm not gonna go really too deep into spoilers at all. But in general, the plot follows Mike, the security guard, who has to spend a few nights inside of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Um, this old abandoned Chuck E. Cheese like restaurant where they have these animatronics, and basically, yeah, they come to life and they're possessed by ghosts. And the movie goes about uncovering the secrets and the history behind the pizzeria and what happened there, and the plot follows Mike as he uncovers it with his sister. And for me, the plot was okay. It was like I understand its necessity because the original game doesn't really have too much of a plot, and it's not enough to base a whole movie on. So they definitely had to add in a lot of regular modern day movie bullshit, and that's kind of where a lot of my problems lie with this movie. Um, but I see its necessity and I don't hate it for its simplicity. Well, firstly, this movie is classified as a horror movie. Um, is it scary? Not really. I mean, there's some gruesome moments with the animatronics, and there's some like a few scary, spooky scenes, but overall, in terms of tension building, there wasn't much. And really, one of my biggest problems with this movie is the video game franchise it's based on is the bread and butter of it is jump scares. And throughout this movie, there are barely any, maybe like two. And usually jump scares are cheap and I don't like them, and it doesn't provide for good horror, but this is one of the only movies where jump scares should be an exception. They should be here and they're not, and that's upsetting. Overall, in terms of the animatronics themselves, though, they do look pretty good. The kind of mechanical and body horror is handled well for a PG-15 film, and it does show you kind of the gruesomeness, and I can see to a younger audience that this could be terrifying, but just me as my now 20-year-old self who's dealt with all these jump scares before, it's not much is here on the table. What I did like though is that they did make a lot of references and little hints to the games and the lore. I feel like the lore it's done a decent service as to like explaining the broad picture of it. Um, but there are moments here where if you've played the original game and you know a little bit about the story and stuff, you'll be like, ah, I remember that. But nothing too deep, which obviously they didn't need to, so it's okay. I think the movie does do a good job at introducing new people to the series, and maybe the small fans don't really know much. It it would be good. But just for me and my kind of perspective, it wasn't maybe enough. Though the animatronics themselves, though, do look very good, and a lot of the animations and the effects are good, and just overall the visual quality is decent here. The camera work and editing is nothing special. Kind of does get slightly repetitive, but it was all right. Music as well, nothing to kind of sing about here, but it does the job. It's suspenseful enough. Some of the old themes are brought back slightly, which is nice. My main kind of gripe with this movie is how they kind of handled Mike's personal life and all of the original stuff they brought in here, like to do with his the conflict between his aunt and his sister, and just like the way that his sister is involved in this movie, I feel is not really explained super well. It's very cliched and things just kind of happen because they it needs to happen for the plot, and I didn't buy it. It wasn't super engaging. I just didn't care for it at all. His aunt as well is a really bad standout character. Like, I understand they needed to have a lot of this to drive the plot, which is okay, but I feel like it could have been handled in a bit more of a creative way. Another point that I didn't like was Vanessa and the way that she was handled. Like, she was just really there to drive the plot. A lot of her actions and behaviors don't really make much sense, even with the end. It was just really a lot of characters and instances here were just plot devices, and it was just quite obvious, quite simple. And simple can be good, but it's just I wasn't exactly sure who this movie is being targeted to. Is it to the new fans, children, old fans? Because the plot and the way that it's handled seems really kiddish, yet a lot of the gore is actually quite graphic and horrific, and it just at times this movie kind of struggles to find an audience, I think. Movie is definitely at its strongest when it's Mike or whoever in the pizzeria exploring the pizzeria, the animatronics moving around, doing their thing. That's where the movie's at its strongest point. And I just wish we could have seen a bit more of that. I feel like this movie focused a lot on Mike and his personal life, and we didn't get to see enough of the actual animatronics in action. And I don't know, it's a bit underwhelming, sadly. So even though the movie doesn't follow the exact lore and all the correct details, I feel like it is a good, kind of like lore precursor to the game, and if people want to get into the lore, it is a good jumping off point. Um, but it just doesn't really exceed or meet my personal expectations. Overall, though, I am satisfied with what I got. Sorry I keep using that word. It's just it's hard to use another one. It's a good place for people who have a small interest in the series, who don't know much, but for the more avid Five Nights at Freddy's fans, which I'm ashamed to say I was one, it doesn't necessarily do the job. Overall, I'd give this movie definitely maybe a strong 6 to a light 7, somewhere around that range. And if you're interested, go ahead and check it out for yourselves. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.